Moving into a new house is supposed to feel like a fresh start. New walls, new memories, and a place to finally call your own. But when the sun goes down and the boxes are half unpacked, sometimes those empty rooms don't feel so welcoming. Every creak sounds louder, every shadow stretches farther, and every corner feels like it's hiding something. Tonight, we're diving into 3 terrifying true horror stories of people who moved into new houses only to discover they were not alone. So turn off the lights, lock your doors, and listen closely. Because these stories prove that what you bring into a new home isn't always just furniture and boxes. Sometimes, something darker comes with it. Story 1. The basement door. For Jenna, buying her first home was a dream come true. A small 2-story house on the edge of town, quiet street, decent yard. The price was suspiciously low, but she chalked it up to good luck. The first night there, she noticed little things. The air inside was colder than it should have been for midsummer. The floorboards groaned even when no one walked across them. And most unsettling of all, the basement door never seemed to stay closed. At first, she thought it was just an old house quirk. She'd shut the door firmly, even slide the bolt lock, but hours later she'd find it cracked open an inch. The dark stairs beyond seemed to swallow the light. On her third night, Jenna decided to settle in with a movie. Around midnight, she heard it, the unmistakable creak of the basement steps, one at a time. Slow, deliberate. Her breath caught. She muted the TV, straining to listen. The sound stopped. Silence pressed in. She convinced herself it was the house settling. But when she turned toward the hall, her stomach dropped. The basement door was wide open. Gathering courage, she grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The beams shook as she aimed it down the stairs. Nothing. Just shadows, stretching across concrete. Still, something about the air felt wrong, thick, damp, carrying the faint scent of soil. She bolted the door again, pushed a chair against the handle, and tried to sleep. Over the next week, it kept happening. Always at night, always when she was alone. And each time she checked, nothing. Until one night, when she woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of whispering. Faint, like a conversation carried through the floor. She pressed her ear to the bedroom wall. The voices were coming from beneath her, from the basement. Terrified, she called a friend to stay the night. Together, they decided to check it out. Armed with a bat and her flashlight, they descended the stairs. The basement was empty. But in the far corner, hidden behind boxes, was a small wooden hatch she hadn't noticed before. It was nailed shut. The friend pried it open. A foul wave of air escaped. Inside was a narrow crawl space, and etched into the dirt walls were dozens of scratches like fingernail marks. Some fresh, some worn deep into the soil. Jenna moved out the next week. She later learned the house had belonged to a family in the 80s whose teenage son vanished without a trace. The case was never solved. And the basement door? The realtor swore it had been sealed for years. Story 2. The bedroom window. Eric was 24 when he bought his first place, a modest ranch-style house in a suburban neighborhood. It was perfect for him, affordable, quiet, and only a short drive to work. The first few weeks were fine, but soon he noticed something strange. Whenever he left for work in the morning, the blinds in his bedroom window would be drawn open. He was sure he'd left them shut. At first, he blamed himself. Maybe he'd just forgotten. But then he started double-checking every night, closing the blinds, tugging the cord tight, and still by morning they'd be open again. One night, determined to catch the culprit, Eric stayed awake. Around 2 a.m., he heard it. The faint rustle of fabric, the slow slide of blinds. He sat up in bed, heart hammering, and stared at the window. The blinds shifted, pulled aside by an unseen hand. And then he saw it. A face, pale, pressed against the glass, eyes locked on his. Eric leapt up, shouting, and the figure vanished into the dark. He grabbed a flashlight, rushed outside, but found nothing but footprints in the dew leading toward the woods behind the property. He called the police, who searched but came up empty. They suggested it might have been a prank. But the visits didn't stop. Night after night, he'd wake to the sound of the blinds. Sometimes he'd glimpse movement. Sometimes nothing at all. One night, desperate, he set up a camera. The next morning, he reviewed the footage. At 2:14 a.m., the blinds shifted. Slowly, a pale hand pushed them aside. A gaunt figure leaned forward, face inches from the glass, staring into the room for nearly a full minute before backing away. Shaken, Eric sent the footage to the police. This time, they took it seriously. Officers combed the woods and found a makeshift camp, a tarp, blankets, and piles of stolen food wrappers. Whoever it was had been living just yards from Eric's home. They never caught him. But after the camp was cleared, the visits stopped. Still, Eric can't sleep in that house without blackout curtains nailed tight to the wall. And sometimes, in the dead of night, he swears he hears the faint rustle of blinds. Story 3. The attic moving into her grandmother's old house, Melissa expected dust, maybe some outdated furniture, not nightmares. The house was charming, with creaky stairs and floral wallpaper, but the attic made her uneasy. The narrow staircase led to a low-ceilinged room filled with boxes. Old toys, family photos, yellowed newspapers. On her first night, as she drifted off to sleep, she heard it. Soft footsteps overhead. Slow, pacing back and forth. She froze. No one else was supposed to be there. Grabbing her phone, she called her best friend on speaker. Together, they listened. The footsteps continued, steady, until suddenly they stopped. Melissa forced herself to check the attic in daylight. She found nothing unusual, just boxes stacked high. But she noticed something odd. One of the old trunks had been dragged across the floor, leaving fresh scrape marks. That night, the footsteps returned. This time, accompanied by a faint dragging sound. Over the next week, the noises grew louder. Scraping, thumping, even muffled whispers. She called a handyman, who insisted the attic was structurally sound and free of pests. "Old houses make noise," he said. But then came the night she woke to find the attic door at the top of the stairs standing open. She crept up, phone light trembling in her hand. At the top, she found the trunk she'd noticed earlier. The lid was open. Inside were children's clothes, decades old, and tucked beneath them a small diary. She flipped through brittle pages, her breath catching as she read the words of a girl named Clara, written in the 1960s. Clara wrote about being locked in the attic when she misbehaved, about scratching at the walls, calling for help no one answered, about pacing night after night until she fell asleep against the trunk. The last entry read, "I don't think they're coming back. It's so dark, so lonely. If anyone finds this, please don't forget me." Melissa dropped the diary, tears blurring her vision. A sudden crash echoed from behind her. She spun, but the attic was empty. Only the trunk, rocking slightly, as though someone had just slammed it shut. Melissa refused to sleep in the house after that. She stayed with friends until she could move. And though the house eventually sold, neighbors say they still hear footsteps in the attic late at night pacing back and forth, searching for someone who never came back. A new house should mean safety, comfort, and a place to start fresh. But for these people, moving in meant stepping into someone else's nightmare. Whether it's the basement door that won't stay shut, the stranger staring through your window, or the footsteps in the attic that never stop. Sometimes, the scariest part of moving isn't the boxes or the unpacking. It's realizing you're not alone. If these stories gave you chills, hit like to let me know. Share your own unsettling new house experiences in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And if you crave more true horror stories, Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for weekly tales that prove the scariest places aren't haunted houses across town. They're the ones you move into thinking you're finally home.